to serve, so we want to get the word out about what we're doing. And today I want to ask for your help with something. We have been in conversation with HEMA Council on Aging and their Dementia Capable Task Force, which David is a member. And our feeling is that we're at a kind of a turning point with this work. We've gone through the forum, we've had this network going for the last several weeks, and we've been in conversation with PCOA about taking some of the leadership on some of this, particularly with the idea of the Memory Cafe, which is a concept that Regina talked about some while back, but it's a way of bringing people together, both caregivers and people with dementia, in a kind of conversational environment. PCOA has some grant money, as well as young, energetic professionals like David here. I don't know how old you are, David, but anyway.
Oh, compared to us,
You are young.
he looks like a kid to me.
Even with the gray?
So we're delighted to have this relationship, but the possibility of offering this more intentionally, the Memory Cafe in this area, and some of the issues with Posada Life are it's in a different spot. Some people confuse that with La Posada, and this is a program that's worth offering in several different ways.
Yeah.
So we're just this morning arranging for a lunch for pastors in the Green Valley community to get together and hear a proposal from PCOA about this possibility. And so if any of you have connections, ways of manipulating pastors in Green Valley to come to a complimentary lunch, it takes every effort we can to get them out. But let me know, and then we can follow up with some other conversations about that. So today we're really delighted to have this opportunity to have David giving this presentation. I asked him when he walked in, do you have a PowerPoint? And he said no, and I said, thank heavens. We have had so many PowerPoint presentations over the last few months.
I've given lots of them too.
Yeah, so we're delighted that he said, let's talk about, I just don't want people to talk, let's sit in a circle. So this is the first time doing this, and it feels like the right thing to do. So, all right, thank you. David, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm David Torrez. I'm from HEMA Council on Aging. I've been with them for about 2 years, and I've been a social worker for 30 plus years. So that's a little bit of my background. I have some educational from U of A and ASU, and brought me here. So hopefully we'll have the discussion, open dialogue on the questions and answers that have come up since I've been doing some consultations past couple of months. And this stapled paper that I gave you, it's not necessarily in order, but these are some of the questions that have come up when I've done my consultations, whether here or in Tucson. So if you wanted to start, again, number one, usually a question is what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? Dementia is just an overall general term for loss of thinking, remembering, reasoning skills that is interfered with some of the brain breakdown. Alzheimer's is specifically a one type of dementia. There are others. Alzheimer's is the largest. It's usually between 60 to 80% of people with dementia have Alzheimer's. And another question that has come up, what are early signs of Alzheimer's? Or on these papers, I have specifically Alzheimer's disease. However, you can pretty much interchange that with just dementia label. Some of the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, it can be different in different people, of course. There's the decline of thinking, There's also, of course, the major aspect of loss of memory. Now, I'm sure that some people have heard the term of mild cognitive impairment. That's a little different than having a diagnosis of dementia. Someone with mild cognitive impairment not necessarily can develop dementia, but they do correlate. So another question is what are the stages of Alzheimer's? There's the preclinical, which is just having someone having some symptoms, whether a lapse of memory, lapse of judgment. Usually a brief cognitive screening will give us a good understanding of where someone's at. That's just a preliminary assessment. And then it goes to be early or mild, middle or moderate, and of course late or severe. Most people tend to be diagnosed in their early or middle stages of the disease. And please, if I'm going too fast or talking too quickly, please.
And if anybody has
Pop up.
questions,
Yes, absolutely.
anybody has questions, use the microphone so we can get it recorded.
My husband's mother had, they didn't call it Alzheimer's at the time, but she did have Alzheimer's. And his sister, not that we knew it of, his family didn't tell us, but she had Alzheimer's and passed away. So does this go down the line to family members?
So that's a question on here, absolutely. So if you want to skip, turn your page. I believe I did address that. I believe I have not. So basically, there is some scientific suggestion that Alzheimer's disease or dementia is hereditary or genetic. Just because someone has the disease doesn't mean they're going to pass it down genetically, but there is a high chance that is prevalent, yes. That answered your question.
You have it in item 4. You have
Yeah, I believe it was in there somewhere. I did type this up today.
The sentence starts, the cause
Yes.
down.
And then, of course, this we're talking about that number 4. What are some of the causes of Alzheimer's disease? We don't know. In other types of dementias, like specifically Lewy body, there's a buildup of protein, and you'll see it on CAT scans, those white dots, and this white material. The buildup of that in Lewy body dementia, that leads to their breakdown in their brain. That's different, of course, than Alzheimer's or the other types of dementia. In general, scientists do not know the cause of Alzheimer's. And then I did make a note in here that individuals with Down syndrome, which is of course a genetic condition, they tend to have a higher prevalence of Alzheimer's, specifically Alzheimer's disease. And then most people, about 60 to 75% of people with Down syndrome will develop Alzheimer's disease.
Is that a recent number?
That number has been around for a while. Of course, the more that our science is developing, the more, of course, this may change. The data may change, but that specific fact has been around for a while.
And do they have any specific, I can probably talk. Can everybody hear me?
People can hear you, but we can't get you on the
Oh, I
recording.
should run the
Oh,
video again.
I see. I better be careful what I say. Are there any specific factors that they can, because that's an interesting population, and is there any specific factors that they can correlate why in this specific population?
I believe chromosomally, but I'm not a scientist or a doctor,
Okay.
so I don't know the specifics on that, but I have
So that could be
read.
something like this, but
Yes.
like a chromosome?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
The question, of course, a big question that has come up with me is is there a way to prevent Alzheimer's disease? There's not any type of medical treatment, procedure, medication that will prevent dementia or Alzheimer's disease. There are things that you can do to slow it down. Usually a good rule is whatever is good for your heart is good for your brain. So any type of movement, any type of exercise is going to be good cognitively. Of course, yes.
I recently read an article by a doctor who has Alzheimer's herself. She's in early stages. And she was told that within 2 years, she wouldn't be able to dress herself or feed herself. Lovely thing to be told. And so she was the president of the university. She talked to someone in the university who said, yes, there are things you can do. And it was the things that you list here: exercise, diet, alcohol, no alcohol.
Yes.
But she had quite a regimen that she had listed out of things, and that diagnosis was given to her 5 years ago. So obviously it's doing something.
How is she doing now?
Pardon?
How is she doing now?
Well, I'm saying the article is current. The diagnosis was 5 years ago.
Right, I understand.
So it was just this year. She's doing very well.
Oh, is she, okay.
She's still writing and painting.
Oh, there you go.
So we need to have writing and painting class.
Yes. And of course, anything that's going to engage your brain is going to be good cognitively. Reading, doing puzzles, art, singing, music, listening to audiobooks, anything that's going to stimulate your thinking is going to be good, and at least preventative, somewhat preventative. Sure, of course.
So I've been taking this online course from the University of Tasmania on preventing dementia. It's actually what they call it, and it's scientists who are evaluating all of these different methods that people are using. And they're, part of the reason for what's interesting about it is all the wild theories out there, you know, like aluminum causes dementia. You can get cured by coconut oil, and all these other things, coconut oil. So all of these things, but they do advocate, like David is talking about, a healthy lifestyle. What's good for the heart is good for the brain for the most part. And cognitively, doing things that aren't necessarily repetitious, but that present new challenges. And so one of the best things to do is learn a new language. So I'm now on my third course in Russian. Just kidding. Just kidding.
And Chinese is next,
Or
right?
get a computer.
There you go.
But the question is there financial help for caregivers or care partners and their loved one with dementia? Yes. I'm sure most of you know just caregiving is expensive, challenging. There are financial sources for that care. I listed a few. The major one here in Arizona would be All Text, which is Arizona's version of Medicaid. That would be a good benefit if someone is approved for that. It's a lengthy and difficult process, but if someone is actually approved, that would financially solve most issues. that Altex.
Could you say where you are on this? I can't find that.
It was number 6.
Oh,
I'm sorry, that's
number
number
6,
six.
okay. All text.
Yes.
Just another thing also is any veterans or spouse of veterans, the aid and attendance benefit that a lot of people don't know about as well.
Thank you.
Veterans and spouses of veterans.
Yes.
Then if you want to move down to number 7, would I need a referral to see a neurologist? Yes. Neurology is considered a specialty medical service. Most require some type of referral from a primary care physician. Most of these that I listed here, they have new patient enrollment. However, my understanding is that they have a long wait.
Very long.
Yes.
Over a year.
Almost impossible.
I didn't include the neurology centers in Tucson because I want to be more local, but it's the same, almost a similar situation in Tucson. They tend to have a long wait list for appointments. But I wanted to provide you the list of neurologists that are here to read And another big question that has also come up is, are there any drop-in centers for my loved one with dementia? There are 2, unfortunately, in the entire Pima County. There's one in Tucson, which is called Sand Ruby. And then the other one, which is not too far from here, is La Posada. They have a drop-in center there as well that's open to the public.
And that's available to everybody.
Yes, absolutely. I know, my understanding is people in Green Valley tend to think that La Posada is just for their residents. However, they have quite a bit of social engagement activities. They have a calendar that's open to the public. They have caregiving support groups there that I have listed there, and some flyers back here. They're an excellent resource here in Green Valley for that kind of engagement.
This is a program that Regina Ford talked about with us, and that's where she works. They actually, as my understanding, it's a separate nonprofit from La Posada. It's called Posada Life Community Services. It used to be called Casa Community Services, which I think was a better name, but now somehow they wanted it. But you have to call for an appointment. You know, if you have a loved one you want to have in there for the day, and it's $75 a day, that's my understanding. So
Yes.
it is an important resource for people to know about, and then they do have the support group and other programs, and that's where Memory Cafe is hosted also, through them. Thanks to PCOA and your grant. Yes, Helen?
I try to go to many things to learn and kind of spread the word. So for the first time, I went to Memory Cafe last month, and I was blown away. It was 1 hour of interaction with people of different levels of dementia. But within that hour, we played bingo, we stood up, we danced, we sang, we had a raffle. It was very, very, very interesting. Coloring, yes. And it was blown away, and I thought, even though I'm a pretty busy gal, I'm going to devote my Saturday afternoon for 1 hour to be with them.
It's only once a month.
Yeah, it's only once a month. I write articles for the paper, and I've been trying to keep those things in the public's eye as much as possible. But it was a rewarding time, a year, just an hour. And I saw people that were caregivers there that are truly, truly faithful and absolute saints. They were patient, they were kind, they were grateful for just that time of working with other people that were caregivers. So it's an amazing program.
What time does that take place?
1 to 2.
Oh,
1 to 2 on Saturdays.
I believe
Only one Saturday
the
a month.
third
Yeah,
Saturday.
one Saturday, that's what I meant. It's on Saturday.
The third Saturday of each month.
Third Saturday, thank you. Yeah, Tom?
I'm going to finally got over my shyness. I was going to intervene on question point number 5 about any kind of a solution. I stumbled into an article by Fortune magazine, and I believe it was February 2021. Fortune magazine is not a double-fold tabloid that you find at the checkout counter. It's a responsible publication. For them to dedicate 14 pages, that's a lot of one single edition. That alone impressed me. But the article was on a compound, L-serine, L-S-E-R-E-N-E. And it's anecdotal evidence of its effect, and probably not reversing, but at least slowing the advance of Alzheimer's. And I realize that the plural of anecdote is not evidence. The reason this is anecdote, you can ask, well, why hasn't this magic formula been subjected to clinical trial? Because there ain't no money in it. This stuff is dirt cheap. And it's surprising how many cases, how many proxies of research that this Fortune magazine article called for. For example, curry is rich in L-serine, and the incidence of Alzheimer's in societies like India, in which curry is a popular dietary ingredient, is extremely low. So I would encourage you, if you, I thought maybe sometime during your past several sessions you would have run into this, but I didn't hear that, so I'm going to bring it up now. L-serine, and I think it's a Fortune February 2021 article.
Back in the back.
Is that E-L-C-O-R-E-N-E? How do you spell it?
L-S-E-R-E-N-E.
I-N-E. I think it's I-N-E, I just looked it up on
You found it?
Google, so it must be. But, yeah, and it does talk about the cognitive.
You wanna, would you say that in the mic for us? Yeah.
Yeah, I just looked it up, and it is spelled L-S-E-R-I-N-E. And, I mean, it's worth looking into for sure.
I just wrote it down there earlier, you know.
Well,
that was
everybody
my-
wanted to know. L-S-E-R-I-N-E.
Well, I have in mind, talk about preventing. When I noticed my husband forgetting more and more some time ago, I did everything I could that I could possibly do. He was so in denial. He was good to walk and play golf. I even got on this mind diet, and I was going to cure him just right there. You know, I just knew. And maybe we slowed it up some, but I almost kind of gave up. You know, we just take good care of him.
Ken wanted to talk about.
Most of you know that I have a brother that has dementia. And what I'd like to ask you is, he's in a lock ward, well taken care of, but now he's getting into trouble in the lock ward, going and sleeping in somebody else's bed, using somebody else's toilet, this type of thing. Is this going to continue to get worse and worse and worse? And what is the future for him now? I know he's never going to come out of this place, but will his behavior get so that they can't keep him where he is? What's going to happen to him?
behavioral issues are challenging for places like that. Not every residential facility their staff is capable of addressing and dealing with those type of issues. It's hard to say whether it will increase. Hopefully your brother is in some type of psychiatric care, because that also goes sometimes hand in hand with the dementia treatments. And I don't know. I don't know if he's going to get worse. They should have treatments, strategies, behavioral techniques to assist him. Just if you're telling me that he's getting into trouble.
Well, that's my view.
Yeah, I believe that it just seems like maybe the staff is not quite capable of taking care of his needs.
Julie, do you want to say something
Sure.
about that? Julie is with Prestige facility, which includes a memory unit.
It does. We have our expressions unit at Prestige, which does focus on all the different types of dementia behaviors. Our caregivers do go through a lot of training to be able to go through what your brother might be going through, but somebody else's, loved one might be going through something else. We do consider our unit a wandering unit because that is what they do. We try to monitor that as long as he's not harming anybody, he's not endangering himself, anybody else. But that's part of the dementia journey. It really is. They're safe, they're in our community. We're going to be monitoring them. If there are residents that don't want anybody in the apartment, we'll lock that apartment and let them have their private space. But every dementia case is different. Nobody is the same. So I would say if he's having some issues, maybe contact the director, see if the doctor can, intervene if there are any things. A lot of times in dementia, they can't tell us what's wrong. They might be in pain. They could have a UTI. They could just not be feeling well. So that expression goes away when they have that diagnosis. So he might just be acting out because he's not feeling well. He may have tooth pain. We all know tooth pain is terrible, right? If he can't tell you that he's got a toothache, he's going to act out. So there could be a variety of different things. And as far as that behavior could continue, but we could try to manage it. So there are different things to
He was
discuss.
taken to the emergency room twice in the local hospital last week
Okay.
because of his behavior.
Yeah, it could be a variety of different things. Have you spoken with them since? I mean,
No.
did they come up with anything? Yeah, I mean, it would just be, running some tests. Like I said, anything that we see is, and Kay, you probably know these things too. I mean, it could be a variety of different things that he's just not able to verbalize. He's not doing it just because he wants to be mean. There's something going on. Yeah.
They even get to a point where they may even become combative with the caregivers, and that's a lot of what they have to deal with,
Yeah.
or urinating or defecating in different areas that's not appropriate. It becomes a problem, but like she said, the staff should be able to either redirect him, or maybe it might be time to look and see if there's another unit that might be better for him. As they progress, I do hospice, so I get the very end of it. And sometimes we get them when they are at the point where they're combative, and medication usually helps them. And kind of along with the staff of redirecting, we can usually get the behaviors under control.
Thank you.
Going back to the day centers, the adult daycare, Jerry had said that the Facade Life one was $75 a day. How much is this Sand Ruby one?
It's even more than La Posada can say. It's about $100 a day.
How much?
About $100 a day.
Well, Regina said it costs that much more than that. Regina said about the adult daycare that it costs more if you're having somebody come in for a day, even though the $75 seems a lot. So those are choices. So, but they do offer lots of good things that people can do in the day if they can be in a group. That's the key.
Yeah, one of the other things about that is that Facade Life, because they also have childcare there at their facility, sometimes they have interactions with the children, and as well as the fact that they provide a meal and snacks and stuff for people. So $75 is bad, and you don't have to do it every day. Some people just do it, you know, when they need a day off, and one day a week or something like that. It gives everybody a break. We have a member of our church who goes, and his wife was telling me he just loves it. You know, he has not lost his socialization. He has no memory whatsoever of anything, but he loves being with people. And so this is just a great time for him to be with people.
I was saying something to this one other time we were meeting, and I do know that if you're a veteran, the veterans will give you a discount or pay for part of the La Posada Community Service Daycare. So that's another route you can go if you're a veteran or spouse.
A question. You just like to hold them.
No. Does long-term care insurance pay for that?
Yes,
It does?
yes it is.
Okay.
That's all tax for here in Arizona.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay.
What about privately owned?
I think she
People
might
that
be
have a
talking
private
about,
their own
yeah,
policy.
Are you talking like a private policy for long-term care? That is very confusing in Arizona, because our version of Medicaid is called All-Tex for Arizona Long-Term Care.
Oh.
But there are actual policies that you can take out. Some people have taken them out with their employer, or like John Hancock, Jen Burke. You have an actual long-term care policy. All those policies are really different. Some of them, I've seen some that pay for a facility, like $100 a day, all the way up to $400 a day. Some also will pay for a day program, if you just have to look at the policy.
Okay, I got a question. Is that realistic at, let's say, our age, I'm going to include everybody here, to take out an initial policy for long-term care?
Yes.
Is it realistic? I don't think it's realistic.
Well,
20 years ago.
the older
Yeah, you
you
really-
are, I took mine out when I was 51.
Right.
And I can tell you, last year, because it was a premier thing, I was up to $7,000 for a year, and they upped it to $16,000 because they wanted to get rid of that policy.
But my question is, that, you got it at 51, but for
Right.
those of us who don't have it now,
It will be very expensive.
yes, that's.
If you can get it.
Right.
And you the chances of getting it over like 65 to 67,
Right.
you're probably not going to get it.
Yeah, and I think that would be a question for financial advisors
Yeah.
as far as whether there's, value in it. So it's a good question. Yeah, and if you started early, but they do keep jacking it up. My sister has, she bought probably 20 years ago, and now it just keeps going way up, so, yeah, big challenges.
There are social opportunities for care partners and their loved ones with dementia. course, social media, Facebook community groups, there's a lot of them specific here that I'm familiar with. Again, I mentioned La Posada, but they have that memory cafe. And then all along the same lines, are there any caregiver support groups available? There are lots are available virtually or in person. I've brought a list of support groups here. There are quite a few virtually and in person.
Miriam, do you want to say a word about your Zoom group? Are you still with the Zoom group?
Through the Alzheimer's Association, the Southwest, I got on a Zoom twice a monthly meeting with a lady from Las Vegas. She's just amazing. I mean, she's such a plain old person, and just the wisdom that comes out of her mouth and the understanding, you know, it's really been helpful to me. Yeah.
Good.
How many are there in the group?
Just about 3. They're not very, but this is the group, Zoom group. She also has an in-person group in Las Vegas in a library, and I'm not too sure how many I'll have to ask her. But I've been sending her information about what I'm learning here, such as the Memory Cafe and the new thing, the Stress Busters. I've been sending all that to her. She's always happy. She's very open-minded. But it's been very good for me as a caregiver.
Is it 1 hour a week? 1 hour every 2
Yes,
weeks?
an hour every other week, or 2 weeks a month. And, yeah, it's great.
Good. I brought a flyer. I listed all of our support groups from Keystone Council on Aging. They're either in person or virtually. And grab them on your way out.
And those of you that may or may not know that we are starting a group here led by Gary and Pam Chambers. And they were trained in this program called Stress Busters Caregiver Support Group, which will start in a couple of weeks. We're not quite sure what the date is going to be, but I think they still have 1 or 2 openings for it. It's a 9-week session, an hour and a half per session. So, yeah.
And as I, wait a minute, what was I going to say? Uh-oh.
That's a very good question.
It's a good sign.
That's mine too. All right, anybody?
The last I heard in the Stress Busters caregivers group, they had 7 people. They can get up to 8. And I've been kind of connecting with Pam and trying to get people to go. So that's a great thing. The other thing that's happening, and I consider these 3 major groups that I think I said initially would be great to get together, is this group here at the Methodist Church, and the Stress Busters group, which will be, for now, it's dementia. In the fall, it will be for chronic diseases instead of dementia, which is similar but different. And then the third group that I'm trying to corral is Lynn Severe, that I know her, and she's trying to get nurses to address the loneliness. And sometimes it's not, in fact, I just was walking around and a man was hanging on a mailbox, and I said, you know, are you feeling good? Well, not too much, da-da-da-da-da-da. To make a long story short, I walked around with him, I went to his home, and basically, he is just plain lonely. So I spent an hour with him. I gave him some information on how he can get out, and he acts like he doesn't want to go by himself, so I will drag him someplace with me to get him going. So I think sometimes loneliness can then create the distance and the impact that then you become antisocial and you withdraw, and when you withdraw you lose interest, and when you lose interest your brain doesn't work. So there's that aspect. The other thing I wanted to say is that about before the pandemic, Valley Presbyterian Church. He had a very interesting program. And what it was is regular people, like, you know, that like to sing, they were invited to go, and they were promoting it for caregivers and their person to come. So we would meet for about an hour, and we would sing all these songs. They gave us the words. We would stand up. We would do all kinds of exercises to coordinate our brains and our voices. And it was a very wonderful, well-received. And the people that came really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, it's not being done now after the pandemic, but they are having drum tapping. So you might want to go to that. And that's at the Presbyterian Church, which I just wrote an article. So if you want to go to what they're in, I'm even in their line dancing. And I got 3 left feet. So those are things you can do.
Look out for Helen, everybody.
Well,
Here she comes.
Another topic that is that's usually brought up is a resistant person, the person that doesn't want to go see their doctor for any follow-ups or for testing. So this is what the other paper is for. Of course, it's not addressing the specific behavioral challenges or medical interventions, but this might be something to try if someone is a loved one is a little more resistant to a follow-up with a doctor. So that's usually a question that's brought up to me, like how to encourage someone to go see their doctor. So that's what this is for.
That's a very, very good topic. Thank you for that. We had a note that came through for the pastors interested in the caregiving support group and a phone number. So I called the woman, and she was absolutely terrified because I had called and she was afraid that her husband might have overheard. And she said, I cannot talk. I appreciate your calling, but there's nothing that I can do. Hopefully in July we're going to go to a doctor, looking for the authority from outside to tell her what she already knows. She knows her husband has a major problem. But, she is trying to find validation from some authority that will say this is what's going on, because she's very intimidated by the possibility of saying something that will upset her husband. So this is a really important conversation. Thank you, David, for bringing that up. Now I'll hand her the sheet.
And we can definitely talk about more on that if anyone's interested, because that's brought up a lot. I have lots of resistant clients. It is very challenging, even on my part.
When we went to the neurologist up at Banner Alzheimer's unit, the neurologist and the nurse practitioner both asked questions about what my husband was doing in front of him. And I'm intimidated. I don't say anything bad about him in front of him, because that's just not how we get along. I'll talk about him behind his back, but I really hated that. So I just kind of went around. And then I called him back the next day and I said, hey, and they said, oh, well, we understand. But what do they expect? I just didn't understand that. But he was diagnosed with vascular dementia. That has talking about the diet. He's probably had a diet like that since he was a kid that could contribute to that, So anyway, here we are. But we eat as good as we can. He has a problem with sweets, however. So anyway.
Through our dialogue, does any other questions come up?
I I'm just curious, what kinds of questions, don't you do some of the screening?
I do, yes.
Could you give us just a couple of examples without
Sure.
telling us too
I
much?
can be very specific on what I do. Don't mind, no problem, my bad. I have my own microphone. There are many different types of cognitive screening. We just use one particular one that's called an AD8. It just involves 8 questions. The answers yes, no, or not applicable. Like, for example, one of the questions is problems with judgment. Would you have problems making decisions, making bad financial decisions, problems with thinking? Another question would be like, do you have less interest in hobbies and activities? Do you repeat the same things over and over, like questions, stories, or statements? Do you have trouble learning how to use a tool, appliance, or a gadget, like a VCR, computer, microwave, remote control? Do you forget the correct month or year? Do you have trouble handling complicated financial affairs like balancing your checkbook, filing taxes, or paying your bills? Do you have trouble remembering appointments? And do you see problems daily with thinking and remembering? They're pretty basic questions, yes or no answers, but usually it gives us a good indication of where someone is cognitively. I mean, they're very simple questions, simple answers, but it's not a diagnostic tool, but it gives me a good sense of where someone's at.
So they're very different questions from the Medicare questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Again, there are other different types of cognitive screenings. This is just one of that we use.
And do you ask that to the patient or
If
to the caregiver?
sometimes both. So like,
Sometimes I repeat something to my husband 3 times, and he'll say, well, you said that 3 times, but he's hard of hearing and doesn't wear his hearing aids. And I don't know, and he doesn't give me any indication if he's really hearing me or not. And so I'm wondering, am I getting it?
that's why I'm always hearing.
There is some association with hearing loss and dementia. Hasn't been fully verified, but these clinical trials and different studies, I mean, the whole process of trying to establish scientific positions is really difficult, but there is some association with that. And I think it has some real validity, partly because the social interaction is pretty well verified. The connection between the loss of social interaction and the onset of dementia. To some extent, my understanding is when somebody begins withdrawing after they've been outwardly oriented, that may be a sign that they have dementia. Also may mean that somebody who keeps isolating themselves gets more and more withdrawn and more into their dementia. So there are some issues about that. It's very important. Socialization is very important in this whole process. Other questions?
Let's see, I was going to ask one about Parkinson's.
Yes.
Yes. With Parkinson's, is that just sort of an automatic?
Not necessarily. I mean, there is a prevalence to someone with Parkinson's to develop some type of dementia, but not all the time.
It's not all the time.
Right.
I have a 42-year-old grandson that has Parkinson's, and so, and he bites all the time, and he exercises. I know that's what he's trying to do, but, so that doesn't necessarily.
Right.
Okay.
That's a good question. Thank you for that.
I was thinking of when you go to the doctor, it's very difficult to talk to the doctor and talk, who's to answer the question. And I think it's helpful as you're going through your daily routines to maybe write down some things that you're noticing. and then give that to the doctor. Yeah, because I think it's difficult to get a word in edgewise or to say things that might be, you feel uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
And the doctors are usually very good about it, and I think they're grateful, you know, because communication in that 15 minutes you get with your doctor is difficult if you don't have it written down.
That's really good tip. Yeah.
All the literature also really stresses, don't talk about someone in front of them like they can't hear you. And that's exactly what they were doing. It just appalled me to hear that.
Well, Ken was given an example of his brother going and sleeping in somebody else's bed. My mother had dementia, and she was 93. And she had a teddy bear. And there was a lady on the floor, she was in a lockdown there. There was a lady on the floor that came in every day and took her teddy bear. And the nurses would take it back to my mom, and this lady would come and get it. And then they were telling me one time, this one person, they don't know who did it exactly, went into everybody's dentures and took them and put them on top of the piano. And they had no idea whose dentures they were. And, you know, as my mother was a very gentle person, hardly ever raised her voice or anything. And when she had dementia, though, she went to the barber or the beauty parlor every week and had her hair dyed and all this every week. Well, when she got dementia, she wouldn't let him touch her hair, wouldn't let her cut it. And I said, Mom, you got to go and have your hair done. And thankfully, the beautician was right there that day. And I said, I would like my mother's hair cut. And she says, well, I can't do it because she'll cover her head with the apron, spit at her, and scratch at her, and this sort of thing. And I said, well, she's not going to do that because I'm going to hold her hands while you cut her hair. And she let me do that, but she tried to get away. But they will start doing crazy things like that.
My brother won't get his haircut.
One of the symptoms of people with dementia is a hypersensitivity, and so there can be they can not take showers, for example, because for them their sensitivity is so heightened that they feel like they're just really being assaulted almost. There's a lot of impact. I mean, you think about the brain and how much it does for us, and some of you may remember, I think it was Regina talking about, brushing your teeth. Think how many things you have to know and think about, and you do it automatically, but okay, it's toothpaste and a toothbrush, well, which one's which, and what do you do, how do you get, any of this done? How do you take the cap off of the toothpaste? Do you put it on the handle or do you put it on the brushy side? And all these things that you do automatically, just amazing how much the brain has control over our lives. So it's a very important little organ up there. David, anything else, or any final shot at it here for people? Yeah, sure.
Speaking of hearing, my husband has always just had very acute hearing, and now he just can't hear anything. I have to repeat things, and I kind of have to, get right up in his face and gently, but, and I'm assuming that that's part of the disease. And also, ceiling fans, he can't stand to have a ceiling fan on him. Hot and cold, it's really hard for him. I think with the hearing, I've read and I watch podcasts frequently, but often people with Alzheimer's can hear or comprehend the first part of what you say to them, or they can hear will comprehend the last part, or maybe the middle. Or if you're repeating it several times, they have a thought in their head. And so when you say something to them, that thought stays there, and they can't switch to another thought. So I think you do have to sometimes keep repeating several times, or maybe distract, or, take them into another thought, and then give your thought across. It takes a lot of patience. But they don't have the ability to comprehend the whole conversation or sentence.
Yeah, that processing goes away, like we all process. So the simpler you can put something, the better. Because like you said, they're going to grab that first, middle, or last. And they can't compute it all, so less is more for them, really, Just that conversation just needs to be very simple.
And I think it's important to remember that that person cannot help that. They
Right.
cannot
Absolutely.
help, and they don't mean to make you repeat something 3 or 4 or 5 times. But I think if you can keep the patience and keep the understanding of where they might be, or if it were you and they were speaking to you, how would you be able to manage that?
One thing my mother used to do is, she never recognized me. She lived in Denver, I lived down here, or in other places, so she didn't recognize me all the time. But one time I went to visit her, and she says, well, I can't visit with you very long because your dad is waiting downstairs for me, and he's got the motor running. And I kindly looked at her and I said, well, Mom, Dad's in heaven. She said, no, he's not. And that shut that down. So you cannot argue with these, you can't do any of that kind of thing. Go along with the flow. And I kind of believe she almost did see my dad at some point. She lived to 96 though. So,
So we're at 4 o'clock and need to bring this to a close. I did want to mention that David is one of the options counselors at PCOA. So you can have individual consultations with him, talk through whatever the issues are on a personal level, and then his skill, his training is basically, his role is to help you look at all alternatives, some options in terms of what level of care and the issues that you need to deal with at this point. So thank you, David, very much for getting us in this circle. And
I'm not a dementia expert, but I'm a resource. Right.
And thank you for not bringing PowerPoint.
You're very welcome.
I did want to say in 2 weeks, Tom, are you ready for this? Tom, are you ready for this? Tom took care of his wife, Diane, for I don't know how many years from diagnosis to when she passed away in October. But he's going to share some of his story. We had already, if you remember, Linda Laird had shared her experience as a woman caring for her husband through his journey with dementia. And I've wanted to have a man to do that as well. So Tom and I have talked, and he's willing to do that next time. So 2 weeks from now, we'll hear from Tom and have a conversation about that. Okay? 2 weeks.
And stay tuned, we've got exciting things maybe we're going to be doing here.
What's that?
I said we've got exciting things maybe we're going to be
We got exciting things. We got exciting things. This is a letter to these churches out here,
Yep.
hoping that we'll be able to build this coalition here. Helen, I need your help.
We got it.
All right. Thank you again, everybody. And David, are you available if anybody wants to follow up with anything? Okay, thank you.
Yes.